It was a night like any other at the city hospital. Nurses moving through dimly lit hallways, patients resting in their rooms, and the soft hum of medical machines filling the air. Outside, rain drizzled lightly, the streets eerily quiet. But then, the hospital's automatic doors slid open, and in walked something no one ever expected, a lioness. Damp from the mist, her golden fur glistened under the fluorescent lights, her eyes fierce yet desperate. In her powerful jaws, she carried something small and fragile, a lifeless lion cub. Gas filled the waiting area. A security guard reached for his radio, fear flashing across his face. But before anyone could react, the lioness did something shocking. She gently placed her cub at the feet of a nurse, her eyes pleading for help. The city hospital was quiet that night, its sterile halls dimly lit, with only the occasional rustle of paperwork and the hum of medical equipment breaking the silence. Outside, the streets were mostly empty, the world settling into the calm of the late hours. But something unusual was about to happen, something that would leave everyone who witnessed it in shock. The automatic doors at the hospital's entrance slid open with a soft hiss. At first, no one paid much attention, assuming it was just another late-night patient or visitor. But when the murmurs began, and the waiting room fell into a stunned silence, the nurses at the front desk looked up and gasped. Standing in the entrance, her golden fur damp from the night's mist, was a lioness. Her powerful body looked tense, her amber eyes filled not with rage or aggression, but something far more desperate. And in her jaws, dangling lifelessly, was a small lion cub. The people in the waiting area froze, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. A security guard instinctively reached for his radio, his hands trembling. The tension in the room was thick, the air charged with uncertainty. Then something even more shocking happened. The lioness took a slow step forward, and instead of attacking or roaring, she gently lowered her cub onto the cold hospital floor. The tiny creature barely moved, its small chest rising and falling in shallow, weak breaths. One of the nurses, Amelia, stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. She had seen countless emergencies in her career, had saved lives and lost them, but never had she been face to face with a situation like this. Yet as she looked into the lioness's eyes, she saw something familiar, something she had seen in the eyes of so many human mothers. It was the look of desperation, of fear, of love. This wasn't a wild beast looking to harm. This was a mother pleading for help. Taking a deep breath, Amelia stepped forward. The lioness let out a low, deep growl, her muscles tensing, but she didn't strike. It was as if she was warning them to be careful, but also allowing them to come closer. Amelia crouched down, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the tiny cub. As soon as she touched its fur, she felt how cold and fragile it was. She pressed 2 fingers gently against its tiny ribs. Its heartbeat was faint, barely there. The little one was on the edge of life and death. "We need an oxygen mask now," Amelia called out, snapping into action. The other nurses hesitated, unsure. "But it's a lion," one of them whispered. "I don't care what it is," Amelia shot back. "It's a baby, and it's dying." The urgency in her voice snapped everyone out of their trance. A nurse ran to grab the necessary equipment, and within seconds, Amelia had an oxygen mask over the cub's tiny muzzle, adjusting it carefully. The lioness didn't move, her sharp eyes locked onto every movement Amelia made. The seconds stretched painfully. The cub wasn't responding. Amelia's heart clenched. "Come on, little guy. Don't give up on me." The room held its breath. Then finally, the cub's tiny body shuddered. A soft whimper escaped its lips, and then another. Its eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. Amelia felt a surge of relief flood through her. "He's breathing better now," she whispered. The lioness took a cautious step forward, her nose twitching as she sniffed her baby. Her ears perked up, her tail swayed ever so slightly, and Amelia could swear she saw something like gratitude in the big cat's eyes. The entire hospital staff stood frozen, watching in awe as the lioness gently licked her cub's head. The once lifeless body now stirred, pressing closer to its mother's warmth. No one knew how she had gotten here, how she had navigated the city streets without being seen or stopped. But one thing was clear: she had come for help, and somehow she had known exactly where to find it. As if understanding that her baby was safe, the lioness slowly turned her gaze back to Amelia. They held eye contact for a brief moment, and in that silence an unspoken conversation passed between them. Then, as gracefully as she had arrived, the lioness picked up her cub once more. The hospital doors slid open, and she walked back out into the night. No one followed, no one stopped her. The city had returned to its stillness, as though it had never even noticed the presence of its most unexpected visitor. For a long time, no one spoke. The security guard let out a shaky breath. A doctor wiped his glasses as if he still couldn't believe what he had just seen. Amelia, however, just stood there, her heart still racing but filled with something different now. There were some things in life that defied logic, things that could never truly be explained. But that night, she had witnessed a miracle. A mother, driven by love, willing to walk into a human world to save her child. And somehow, in a world where fear often dictated action, kindness had prevailed. As the lioness disappeared into the night, carrying her revived cub, the weight of what had just happened settled over the hospital staff. Some wiped their eyes, others exchanged looks of sheer amazement. The security guard, who had initially reached for his radio in fear, now stood speechless, his hand frozen over his belt. It was a story that no one would believe, a moment that none of them could ever explain. Amelia let out a long, shaky breath, her hands still tingling from the adrenaline. She knew she had done what she had sworn to do, save a life, no matter whose it was. But as she stared at the darkened streets where the lioness had vanished, she couldn't help but wonder, where had she come from? Would the cub survive out in the wild after coming so close to death? And most of all, how had this mother known that in a place built for humans, she would find the kindness she so desperately sought? That night, the city hospital recorded no official report of the incident. No police were called, no cameras captured the moment. But for those who had been there, the memory was etched into their souls forever. Because sometimes miracles don't come with flashing lights or grand gestures. Sometimes they arrive silently, on four paws with nothing but hope in their eyes.